Hello, and welcome to the director's commentary for The Flame and the Flood. My name is Forrest Dowling, and I was the designer on the game, and you're going to be hearing a bunch from me throughout the game, wherever you see these little glowing cassette tapes. First off, I wanted to introduce some of the other voices that you're going to be hearing from. So without further ado, let me hand it off to Sync.
Hey, I'm Scott Sinclair. I was the art director on the game and a founder at the Molasses Flood.
And my name's Gwen. I was also a founder at the Molasses Flood, and I did the animations, the effects, and so forth for the game.
Hi, I'm Chad, and I'm also a founder of the Molasses Flood, and I am the environment artist on the game.
My name is Damian Isla. I was one of the two engineers on this project, and I focused on a bunch of the river generation, the AI, some control stuff, the Mac port, all kinds of things. With only two engineers, you end up having to cover a lot of bases.
So anyway, without further ado, feel free to run around this opening camp, look for the cassettes, frob them, as we say in the game design world, and listen to the commentary. This is the opening camp. We call this Camp Pinewood. This is kind of the continuation almost from the menu, which I think is kind of where the camp actually starts, and that was something that early on we were trying to do, is join the menu with the game.
Trying to make the main menu a piece of the narrative, actually have some meaning and kick off our mysterious story where you get a little glimpse of this unknown dog, Aesop, and this backpack and how that's actually delivered to your player character. And I really wanted to have that be an extension of the starting island and the initial quest, the main menu, that is.
Yeah, one thing that we wanted to do right at the start is kind of, you're always looking to raise questions and to give the player something to think about, while also giving them enough information to drive them forward. And I think that that's sort of like the big driving goal of these early moments, with the dog, the fire, the skeleton, the bag, the radio, was just, okay, so you're alone, you're in the woods, you've got this radio, there's a signal, but you don't know what it is, and there's this mystery, like, where did this dog come from? There's a glimpse at the backpack, and it's got this patch on it that, if you've played all the way through the game, you'll know what that means in the end. Yeah, that was sort of where we started out, with trying to kind of raise all these questions while giving you just enough kind of meat to get you rolling. So that was sort of one of the big
it gave
goals.
Gave us an interesting skin for those necessary evils, like the loading screens and streaming time and whatnot, that those bits and pieces along the way to the player finally getting control of the character for the first time, like had a bit of meaning.
So there was the narrative goals with Camp Pinewood, and then there was also just straight up functional goals, in that we needed to squeeze a whole lot of kind of training and orientation for the player into this area, and there's a number of different ways that we did that, probably some more elegant than others. Like there's definitely tutorial screens that fire off, which as a designer I'm not super fond of, but at the same time there was like, one of the issues with a survival game is you need to get so much information into the player's head so quickly. Like it's kind of hard to have a slow ramp up when right off the bat, like what your body needs doesn't really change over time. Like immediately you always need to stay warm and eat and whatnot, and we balance things so that some of these things are not as pressing early on, but you kind of need that information up front. So yeah, we've got these prompts that pop up, but also we tried to just create situations, even just in this little space, that gave you an opportunity to learn things. Like a late addition that I ended up putting in was related to people not really figuring out how to craft and cook things, which is like a key part of survival in this game. So now the first time that you run through this camp, and only the first time, I ended up spawning a couple pieces of corn that you could collect with some tutorial messages to instruct you how to go to the fire and cook an ash cake, which is like a super good piece of food for you to have. But that was like an example, I guess, of something that was a super late addition when we saw oh, here's the thing that nobody's really, or a huge amount of people are not figuring out and are being frustrated by. So we ended up adding that in.
I think the identity of the summer camp also lends itself to just a natural way to broadcast some of these basic verbs and goals to a player through elements in the environment. You know, camper training. Not to say that it was a replacement for meta pop-ups 100%, but that was our intent, was to let that environment be a little bit more dense with information graphics and things that fit the identity of a summer camp.
Yeah, well, so the all the signage around there, right, is like...
Yeah, attempting to double up on the meta screen, or actually give players a thing to click on that would allow them to pick and choose what information was put in front of them.
Pinewood is one of the most special environments in the game for me. I think it's our oldest environment that stayed in the game. Like, we built a version of it for Kickstarter, and it became kind of our staging area for all of our new assets over time. You know, when the new foliage and the new trees, cabins, all that came in. The iteration on how to light and what to do with the atmosphere, I think there are hundreds of different versions that we could go back to of Camp Pinewood, and pretty happy with the way it turned out.
Yeah, I think it's an example of the identity and character that we kind of wanted to place onto every location in the game, but that became tougher with procedural generation and the scope of the project. But
right,
yeah, I think it's a great example of a place, you know, with an identity.
Yeah, it's kind of our
and its own character.
What we were hoping to reach, and I think some of the other bespoke locations got closer to that.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
In the campaign mode, definitely, it did become a challenge, I think, to preserve that and also figure out the amount of tutorial and design elements that we needed to sort of cram in there after the fact. But you know, so goes game development.
Watching people play, the first thing I sensed when watching playtesters play the game was in the opening camp they immediately fell in love with the dog. And I think that's part of the narrative work that Sync did early on, even from the Kickstarter. We had this scene where Aesop would drag this bag over to you and you would pet Aesop, and then Aesop would kind of playfully chase you around, and in the entry camp in the opening area, Aesop was always really happy, all the way through until you embark on the dock, and you have this moment where you pet the dog on as you start your journey. This built a lot of closeness between your character, Scout, and Aesop the dog, and I think that actually resonated with people pretty well. I think that was something we were pretty successful with.
I remember our goal related to that initially was to consider that the player character as a three-part entity. You have Scout, the dog, and the raft, and wanting players to quickly feel like that combination of pals was the character, was your player. That the dog and the raft were a prime extension of your character.
And as things go awry in the game, the raft gets dinged up, and as well as you get dinged up, but Aesop's always by your side, your loyal dog. I was pretty happy with how Aesop turned out. I think he was a pretty lovable companion. So one of the most fun parts about being an animator on this project is every now and then I would just get a really awesome model from Sync, and I'd think to myself, how can I push this and how can I have fun with this? And I remember this raft for the character when we first got it. I think everybody was imagining it would be this static raft, and I remember early on we were trying to come up with a way to transition between when you were on the river and when you were on land, and we needed some kind of visual to cover that up. And so I kind of made this docking animation, and I was like trying to figure out, is there going to be a rope on every dock that you tie to the raft? And then I just rigged up the raft so that the tire could come off and you could throw the tire over the dock. And as I did it, I thought to myself, oh no, Sync is going to kill me. I totally messed up his model to do this and probably stretching it. And he was like, he liked it. And that was kind of the beginning of the raft becoming a bigger and bigger thing.
You know, we certainly didn't think in modeling or in the concept phase of creating that raft that it would be so modular or dynamic, and it was really cool to see Gwen work her magic through rigging and animation to make that thing come to life. You know, the way it would rock, the way the planks would come off, the way the tire was used. It's amazing for how few back faces were put into that model.
Yeah. You keep in mind, I took the initial rafts and I made it have damage states, and I made it so that things could fly off and stuff. And then after the fact, we decided that we needed to be able to upgrade the raft. We needed to be able to bolt all these other things onto the raft. And you had this temporary shelter that was always there, and that had to...
Oh, that was such a challenge, too, of trying to fit all that stuff into, like, what amounts to a few pixels on screen.
Yeah, I think crushed it with that stuff. Animating the raft is probably the most fun I've had across this game, because between like the marina animations, the hit reacts, and the stuff flying off the raft,
definitely above and beyond what I thought we were going to end up with.
I think it turned out pretty well, and it was a really fun collaboration with me and Sync. I really enjoyed doing that. So one of the most fun parts about being an animator on this project is every now and then I would just get a really awesome model from Sync, and I'd think to myself, how can I push this and how can I have fun with this? And I remember this raft for the character. When we first got it, I think everybody was imagining it would be this static raft, and I remember early on we were trying to come up with a way to transition between when you were on the river and when you were on land, and we needed some kind of visual to cover that up. And so I kind of made this docking animation, and I was like trying to figure out, is there going to be a rope on every dock that you tie to the raft? And then I just rigged up the raft so that the tire could come off and you could throw the tire over the dock. And as I did it, I thought to myself, oh no, Sammy's going to kill me. I totally messed up his model to do this, and probably stretching it. And he was like, he liked it. And that was kind of...
Yeah, so one of the things early on, we were just starting the project, we were looking for mood and inspiration, and that meant, looking at books and films and whatnot. And one thing that we started was, I think, a Spotify playlist, and we were just picking out different musicians and whatnot. And there was a guy, William Elliott Whitmore, that I really liked. He had an album called Field Songs, and it was just this very gravelly kind of country folk acoustic guitar stuff. And I started playing this for Sync and the folks in the studio, and we started building up this playlist. And Sync at one point kind of interrupted. It was like, I know a guy who does this kind of stuff, and that, I think, sparked us working with Chuck.
I think hearing that playlist initially, I think it was immediately apparent that was the direction we wanted to go, at least for me. I don't remember how far along we were and what reference point we were at when we decided to go for the Southern Wilds thematically.
I think it was pretty early. I think we sort of zeroed in on that pretty quickly. Like, it was sort of Survive, River, and then we kind of zeroed in on the South.
Yeah. I think going into this, we knew audio was going to play a huge role, especially having come from Irrational and knowing how much that can do for you.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember some of our early conversations with Chuck about it, and, I feel like super fortunate that we were able to work with him. And I know, Sync, you had quite a lot of history.
Yeah, so Chuck Reagan is a longtime friend of mine, met in college, played in bands together, toured together. And the evolution of his career led him to be producing music that, fit the bill, like, to a T, what we were looking for. And it was just a natural, obvious collaboration to kick off. Couldn't have worked out better. I remember walking through Kendall Square, and it was really late at night, and I get a phone call on my cell phone, and it's Chuck sitting at a campfire in his backyard in between tours, and he's wanting me to sit down right then and there while he riffs on his guitar and plays these first few sketches of the initial title track.
Yeah. I love the story that he told us about his actual process of writing the Flame the Flood, the album, where I think he spent about a week out on the river, and he took his pickup truck, his guitar, fishing equipment, and his boat, and I think he just basically fished by day, camped, and wrote songs by night.
Full immersion.
Yeah, he sort of lived the Flame the Flood life while he wrote the album.